For a long time, France has always been in denial of the things that it has done in Africa. It's always been in denial of the history, the pain, and the effects of colonialism that France's invasion of Africa had. It's always been in denial about the one-sided business deals that it does on the continent. It's always been in denial about the pain and suffering that the country has caused many Francophone countries and how the unfair deals in terms of doing business that it operates on with impunity on the continent have slowed down growth. And they almost got away with it until media personality Adele Onyango said it to the face of the French president that whatever they're doing is wrong and it has to come to a stop. And in their constant denial of what they did, but trying to tell Africans what they should do, it just shows the sheer arrogance of the French people and their total disregard of human life and development on the continent.
The breakdown in understanding what France fully stands for is fueled by the continued collaborations that France has with agencies, leaders, and individuals who have glaring integrity issues, whilst on the other hand, claiming to be standing for human rights. So on one hand, we have France that is entrenched in issues around racism, around exploitative dominance, and whilst on the other hand, they're still claiming to teach others about democracy. These are two profiles that one cannot fill at the same time. And when you try to do that, we find it rather arrogant.
Hi guys, how are you doing? Welcome to another episode of this sessions. My name is Zandera Oganga. I am a business journalist by profession, and I enjoy coming on here to just discuss matters Africa, African empowerment, Black people, and how we can rise up and take our rightful place at the global stage. Today, I want us to talk about a very fierce Kenyan media personality and the conversation that she started at a global platform. It is no secret that France was one of the colonizers of Africa. And unlike other colonizers, France has sort of worked very hard to sanctify itself of the sins that it committed back when it was a colonizer and continues to actually commit. You'll hear countries like Britain and Germany and be very upfront about their colonial history. And when I say upfront, it's like take 1% of responsibility. But rarely will you ever hear France take accountability or any form of responsibility of the fact that they were on the continent as colonizers. And by extension, they don't take accountability for the things that they did here. Colonization was not a walk in the park. It involved brutality, it involved torture, it involved abuse, not just abuse at a physical level, at an economic level. African natural resources were being looted, were being stolen, and taken to Europe to develop other countries and continents at the expense of the people that lived in this country. The history of France on the continent is nothing new. When France was granting independence to Francophone countries, they had to sign very one-sided terms. They had to sign unfair deals to get independence. A while back, I was listening to Dr. Arikana Chihombori, and she said some of these African countries have to go through France in order to be able to do business. They still pay for some of the infrastructure that France developed in this country as if France did not benefit from being in those countries. Some of their monies are still being held by France in their central bank, and this just sort of it's like Francophone countries have one hand tied behind their back when they're going to the battlefield, and not a literal battlefield, but when they're trying to develop, when they're trying to grow, when they're trying to be democratic, it's like one hand is held behind their back by France. And unfortunately, you will never get France to publicly acknowledge and admit that they're doing these things in Francophone countries and former colonies. And Adele Onyango was not having any of it. To the face of the French president, she said, you have to acknowledge what it is that you've done. That is when we begin to have a conversation about healing, reconciliation, how to move forward.
It is no secret that the current relationship between Africa and France is complicated. And in order for us to build a relationship that addresses issues that affect not only Africa, not only France, but the globe, then it's important for us to interrogate this very complicated relationship and ask ourselves three things. One, what is not efficient? Two, what is not ethical? Three, where do we see integrity gaps? And to be able to do these three things, we're going to have to be brutally honest. The history of colonization is understandably very important. For Africa, it's a past that is as painful as it is destructive. And the effects of colonization can still be felt to date. And I'm not just saying economically, but even on an interpersonal level. We, as Africans, feel the pain of colonization every single day. Now, the lack of a clear and strong acknowledgement of the continent's pain on this destructive past results in skepticism. And the absence of actions that will further push the acknowledgement is also a major issue in the current France and Africa relationship. In fact, the air of denial that France chooses to sit in is uncomfortable, not only for Africa, but also for France. And it does no good for either one of us.
The thing that baffles me in this whole scenario is the fact that France were colonizers. France have not done good things on the continent. If you look at France Afrique, it's an exploitative agreement. You know, it's an agreement that ensures the interest of France, both economically, politically, geographically, are taken care of at the expense of Francophone countries. But they will not fully acknowledge the impact that it has. They will say, oh, you know, it's time to reimagine it so that it reflects the times upon which we live in. Yes, in reimagining it, can we examine how it's been working? Can we re-examine how it has performed, who it has served? Has it served Africans? Has it served France? And to what end? To what end is even the relationship between Francophone countries and France as impactful and as important as it's touted to be? And Adele says, if you do not address that, and you want to teach us about democracy, it's just sheer arrogance. You cannot lecture us about democracy, yet you yourself know nothing about democracy because you refuse to acknowledge some of the things, some of the undemocratic things that you've done.
How can you trust the source of your pain when the source doesn't acknowledge it? What we end up with is skepticism on what exactly does France stand for. And so we ask you, Mr. President, how strong can a relationship that is built on pain, that is built on skepticism, and that is built on lack of trust really be? We, not just as a team here, but all of us in this room and the 5,000 who helped with the report, and the millions more on the continent and off of the continent, want a commitment from you, Mr. President, that you will join us in the eradication of La France Afrique, which is a very unfair dominance, and it has to end. Furthermore, the breakdown in understanding what France fully stands for is fueled by the continued collaborations that France has with agencies, leaders, and individuals who have glaring integrity issues, whilst on the other hand, claiming to be standing for human rights. So on one hand, we have France that is entrenched in issues around racism, around exploitative dominance, and whilst on the other hand, they're still claiming to teach others about democracy. These are two These are two profiles that one cannot fill at the same time. And when you try to do that, we find it rather arrogant. What it creates is a cognitive dissonance, which is that discomfort you feel because of these two conflicting values. It not only doesn't make sense, it is unsustainable, it births a negative perception, and an ambiguity in knowing once again what values does France stand for.
And in finishing her speech, Adele calls for a multifaceted consultation process. You cannot find you cannot find rather solutions to African problems without having Africans on the table, and you cannot just talk to the same breed of people who are your enablers. You just can't stick with politicians who do not mind doing scrupulous business with you at a certain fee. If you pay the right amount, they'll turn the other way. You need to engage young people. You need to engage civil society. You need to engage activists. You need to find a way to integrate the voice of the masses into it, so that you're not just doing business with two people in the country and the other 30 million or 20 million or 50 uncomfortable and suffering from what you're doing.
Now, it is very clear, because we're all here, that the current relationship is imbalanced. It's not collaborative, and in some instances, it's exploitative. We have social impact solutions built without any input from relevant African civil society organizations who are a resource when it comes to really understanding problems on the ground and creating solutions that run efficiently. And they're a resource that Africa is willing to lend to France. Let's also not forget that whilst we in this room are here because we want to change and repair this relationship, there are some who are benefiting from this current dysfunctional relationship, be it private businesses from France on the continent with non-ethical practices, or corrupt individuals and groups from both France and Africa. This group, and the lack of a very loud and public condemnation of this, obviously fuels skepticism. So this honest interrogation is a very important first step, because the strengths and weaknesses of this current relationship will dictate the success or failure of our collective future relationships. But we are not only telling you what's not working. We are very solution-driven, which is much unlike the heads of states that you're used to me saying. We know exactly what you need to commit to today, and we have a clear path on how we can achieve that.
Well, guys, that's all we had for you today. I'll see you again next time on the channel. If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what your thoughts are, and I'll see you again next time.